At this point, we have the main proportions nailed down, at least blocked out. And we're now going to start getting some more anatomy into the sculpt. But before we do that, we're going to present Morten.
Yay, I'm here as well.
Morten is going to keep popping in and out of this tutorial as we come along for various reasons. And he's going to help us here with sculpting, with some clever remarks and good observations about ZBrush sculpting.
That's what I'm here for.
No pressure.
It's always nice to have sort of... Because we did this before in another tutorial where we were actually two people for the recordings. And it's really nice to just have another person's perspective and sort of complement each other when you're talking about what's actually happening.
Sound less like a robot and more like, an actual human being.
Yeah.
So back to the sculpting here. You can see that we're just blocking out the skeletal features now. We're not doing anything regarding any kind of fleshy bits, apart from maybe the nose, but it's just the main bits of the skeleton.
It's important to sort of, when you do a sculpt like this, because the face is such a complicated thing, to not get bogged down with details. And that's a common thing with everything we do. It's like, you gotta keep it simple from the beginning.
Yeah.
Because this way you make sure that all your bony landmarks are where they're supposed to be. And it just makes it a lot easier to fill in the muscles and the fat and everything afterwards.
Yeah, if you follow this methodology of sculpting, which is main proportion first, then bony landmarks, then muscle, then fat, then skin, and then small details on top, you're gonna have a solid sculpt at the end. It might not work for various reasons. Maybe the design isn't there, or maybe one of the steps isn't done thoroughly. But if you've done this as you should, it will feel like a credible sculpt in the end, pretty much in every single case.
Yeah.
So you see, still nothing going on in terms of flesh, just the bony bits.
You can't really make out any details so far, and that's what's really important, because it limits you. If you have that mindset that you're not going to focus on details until you've got the character down, you've got the shape that you want, then life is just going to be easier for you
in every aspect of your life.
It will make your life better.
This might be the number one issue I see in sculpting as well. People start doing details way too soon. We're not adding details until one of the last chapters here, where we add high frequency details. You just can't do it if you want your work your sculpt to actually work. I
think one of the sort of a good question is sort of, when do I start adding detail, right? And it's not a simple question to like sculpt for this long, then add detail to this. It's a very gradual thing, and it just comes with sort of sculpting experience. The more you sculpt, the more you make faces, the more you make creatures, bodies, anything, then you start to learn, okay, I'm at a point now where I can't get more out of my sculpt at the resolution it's at, so now I'll start adding the next layer of detail. Not saying that the next layer of detail for this is like high frequency pores or anything that. It would be, we start to get in some more features so we can recognize the eyes, maybe the nostrils, holes in the mouth, the ears and stuff like that.
So when we say this tutorial here is about the why you do something and the over workflow, this is what we mean. We don't want you to recreate this exact sculpture. We're not going to talk about use clay buildup from position A to position B. This is more, we want you to create 1,000 sculpts based on the approaches we do here.
And there's no sort of set way to sculpt when you're doing this. Yes, we have some preferred brushes. Like, there's a lot of, clay buildup, Damien Standard, the standard brush, clay trim brush and stuff like that. That's sort of like, you get some nice planes and you get some nice details, but it's not like you have to use these tools. I'm sure you could make an amazing sculpt with a snake hook brush
and insert train brush, which is amazing.
It's a great way to start out your mesh.
Yeah, but it's the methodology we talk about here is the same one they've been doing for hundreds of years, and the one they will keep using for hundreds of years, because this is not about ZBrush. This is about the techniques. This is about the way of thinking.
And you can see now, if you look at the video, that we've actually stepped up in terms of resolution.
Yeah.
Because we were at the point, like we just said, you got to evaluate what's the point where I can't get anything more out of the resolution that I currently have. Unlike real clay, real clay is just like infinite resolution, right? So I guess that's one of the advantages that you get with digital, is that it's a sort of step by step.
Yeah, exactly. So once you have a foundation down, once you have something like the skull and the overall jaw, like you can see the characters, it's kind of working at a distance, because when you blocked all of it in, then you can start to very roughly blocking in some eyes, some mouth and all that. And when doing this, I'm constantly looking in the mirror when doing it. You're doing like all these extremely silly expressions, and I'm touching my face and seeing how the pressure of my finger responds to the various pieces of my face.
Yeah, because it's like you've got a live model right in front of you, like. And I think because a lot of our friends who are animators have this as well. You're doing expressions, and the same thing with like taking pictures, reference pictures of yourself for poses. That's something we utilize a lot.
Use it all the time. So many reference
pictures. You can always try to Google Superman pose, and you're probably going to find something. But if you're in that pose yourself, you'll start to feel, how it's like, where is it restricting your, so if it's your face, you make an expression where what's hard to do, what's impossible to do with your face. Yeah. And like Henning said, touching your face is great. Yeah. Who doesn't like touching their face? But it's a good sort of indicator of like, how thick is my skin here? Can I, if I tense my face, can I feel the muscles here? Or like, with the nose, where's the bridge of the nose? What's bone? Yeah. What cartilage? What's muscle?
So useful. For instance, the very tip of your nose is vastly different from the bit just between your eyes, because the tip of your nose is made of cartilage, and what's between your eyes is made of bone. So it feels very different.
Yeah, and then you also have to treat the sculpt that way.
Very different.
It's like when you think, like you put down your strokes, you put down that stroke between the eyes, you got to put a little more pressure because it needs to be hard. But when you're on the tip of the nose, it's a lot softer. Yeah. So maybe you think about sculpting a little more soft.
Yeah, exactly. And when doing this as well, I'm definitely looking at reference like this. This is not being sculpted freehand with just using my mind as a library. When doing that, I've done it a couple of times just doing it freestyle, and you get like 60-70% of the way. It can look all right, but if you want some like real credibility to your sculpt, you need to utilize proper reference, such as real photos.
Yeah, because like your mental library might be vast and massive, and you might be able to remember everything.
Yeah,
but most people can't. Yeah. And even like drawing from memory and stuff, there's always things that you get wrong that you just can't. You can't always remember everything. And a lot of people, I don't know, not even when they start out, but when they keep doing it, they're like, no, I don't want to use reference, it's cheating. Yeah. But not using reference is, I would say, it's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes literally no sense not to use reference. I was teaching at a school some months ago, and there was a person sculpting an old man, and I asked him for his reference, and he went to Google and Googled old man, and that's just, please don't be that person.
It's like 1,000 people before him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You just find the most old man. Yes, this is the reference.
Yeah, exactly. Like when if you're showing somebody your work, you need to present reference with it, because otherwise you don't know what you're talking about. You don't have. It's impossible to have a proper conversation. Yeah, and you just need to ground it in something. So if you're doing an old man like we're doing here, we're spending hours to gather reference. I think I have like 60 reference pictures just for this guy here, which includes a lot of different things, such as, well, obviously old men, but also just different ethnicities and different ways skulls work, different ways of the skin is reacting to light and all that. I just have reference on everything for it.
Yeah, because like when it comes to old people, like most people that do CG aren't like ancient old.
No.
Like this guy, he's pretty old, and his sort of muscles, they've been going for a long time. Yeah. They're tired, so they'll sag a lot more. A lot of the fat will start to disappear. I mean, unless you're like a really big man, then you'll obviously still have fat. But everything in general will be more soggy, so the muscles won't be as tight, and you can see that on his neck, for example. That there's a lot more of like sagginess. You can see the stringiness of like the muscles underneath. This also sort of starts to show when it comes to the bony landmarks that they might be more apparent.
Yeah.
And this is something you can accentuate what's happening in this sculpt. This sculpt is a little more stylized than if we were going for like a realistic figure sculpture, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's fine. So you just start to accentuate those features that would already be there, like, you know, the cheekbones or something like that.
It's very important that you know the subject you're going to be sculpting. Let's say you're doing a beautiful young lady and you add like real like soggy cheekbones. I mean, the appeal is gone right away.
Yeah.
You need a lot more details and a lot more like droopy skin, and you would just treat it very differently. For instance, if you're doing like beautiful woman, you would treat it with only low frequency details. You wouldn't have pretty much no high frequency details at all, apart from maybe the pores and all that. But you wouldn't
wrinkles,
no like soggy skin, like no anything on that. Just pure good shapes.
Same when it comes to babies.
Same when it comes to babies. Add wrinkles to babies and it looks like a 1980s horror film.
It's really scary. But babies are really hard.
Yeah.
And this is again another progression of like the next step of detailing, right? We've subdivided once more, and this gives us just a little more room to play with the details.
And it's just at a couple 100,000 polys at this point. I've seen guys, even professionally, just going absolutely ape shit with polygons.
Yeah.
They just subdivide up to like 10 million right away, and don't do that. Just keep it as I try to keep it as low as possible. As like Morten mentioned before, if you're working in a low resolution, it means that you're forced to not work on details. You're forced to just think about the basic shapes.
Yeah.
And I don't subdivide until that level is working, until I need more resolution to define it.
One thing that we did here was which is a really nice tip actually, is the back face masking. Mm-hmm. When you're doing something that's really that hasn't got a lot of skin to it, like maybe the eyelids or the ears and stuff like that, you sometimes have a tendency to sculpt through. Yeah. So turning on back face masking just helps you to preserve that without sculpting on what's behind it.
And back face masking just in the interface. You just see it in the middle of the interface, slightly to the right. Also found on a brush, auto masking, back face masking. If I can remember Seabird from memory.
That was like discovering that feature, just that blew my mind.
Yeah.
That was like, because before that it was like, go in and mask off a few areas and then, terrible.
What we're doing now is we're adding actual eyeballs to the character. This is so important because inside of the eye socket, there's obviously an eyeball.
Yeah.
But this is something a lot of guys don't think about, which means if you come to deformation and you're trying to like close the eyelid, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and you can see that here. Like, yes, you eyeball. Oh god, that was a terrible pun. It wasn't. So but I have to say, you eyeball the shape of the eyeball or the socket to begin with. Kind of round, right? But until you've actually got the eyeball in there, you have no idea how it's going to affect the skull.
Yeah.
So by getting that in there at an early stage, you can start to build around, because it's actually kind of a big volume.
Yeah,
and it takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of times you might be sculpting something without the sphere inside, and it just looks a bit odd. You can't necessarily say why it looks odd. It just doesn't really work. And a lot of reason is the eyes might not work. This is something we've talked about in other tutorials as well, but if your eyes don't work, your sculpt will not work. Yeah. Simple as that.
It's the first thing you look at.
Yeah.
At any person, like it's just ingrained in our evolution, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To recognize faces. So we go for the eyes straight away.
Yeah. So I always spend time on the eyes. So we're going to be doing that later on as well. We're going to paint like a spec roughness map for it. We're going to be painting like color painting, like actually painting the iris for it and all that. And we're going to spend some time on that in comp as well once everything has been rendered. Because the eyes are so important. They're arguably more important than anything else in the face, apart from maybe like proportion.
But even then, if you've got shitty eyes, then it still looks weird.
Exactly.
And one thing is, like, you can see there's still we're preserving a lot of the skeletal structure just because, I don't know, Henning likes creepy dudes, and this is kind of creepy.
When it comes to sculpting.
Sure thing. And all of that helps to accentuate his age.
Yeah.
It's skeletons are pretty old as well.
They might be. One thing which is super important when it comes to sculpting this is something Morten and I were taught when we were in school, is one of the most important things when it comes to anything in art is how it makes you feel. And this is something I've been thinking about when I was sculpting this. How do I want this character to feel? This character here is not a nice character. I'm thinking that he's like a war criminal or something like that, something foul. He's not a nice man. And the way you treat something like that is differently from if he is a nice man. How would you sculpt a nasty man compared to a friendly grandpa? The friendly grandpa would be like bigger, rounder shapes. It would be softer in general. Well, this like old, gnarly old man, he would have protruding cheekbones. His skin would be droopy. He generally wouldn't look very nice.
No, very unhealthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when you think of a nice grandpa, right? What do you think? You think of someone maybe with a beard, a little bit of a smile in the face, happy eyes, and generally a little more padded out.
Yeah.
And not as bony as.
But here we're going like full on crazy bony. And also in the shape language. We have way more triangles here in general. Like you can see it with eyebrows as well. They're kind of like going down, like they're a bit evil, really.
Everything is it's a lot more sharper than we would have for a nice character.
So this is something we think about for every single stage of the character. Let's say you're texturing him. What kind of colors would you use? He's a nasty man. Would you use like nice warm light or nice warm colors on him, or would you use like kind of like sickly yellow color? And that's what we're doing in the end. I'm using way more greens and yellows to really make him like feel like the character. How would you light the character like that? So the feeling, if you don't know the feeling of the character, you're in trouble.
One of the things when it comes to the sculpt, now if we're specifically talking old people, you can see our focus on the eyes is we want to keep the shape of the eyelids, but because that throughout when you age and stuff, that doesn't actually change that much, just around the borders.
Yeah.
It's all the fatty deposits above the eyes. The muscles there, they start to become really loose.
Yeah.
So it has a hard time holding back the fat. Yeah. So a lot of old people you'll actually see, I don't know, that wasn't funny, but a lot of old people you actually see like a lot of droop.
Yeah.
So it just starts to mess with their vision, and it actually tends to sog down a little more.
Yeah, they might have like surgery to actually remove like the fat from above their eyes. And same for below as well. Like everything, when you get like super old, your entire face just kind of melts.
Yeah,
like
gravity. Just think gravity.
Yeah. That's actually a very good point. That's something a lot of guys don't think about. Gravity affects everything on a character. Imagine if you're lying on your stomach, and let's say you're like a slightly obese person, or you have a lot of loose fat, and you're lying on a bed. How would the skin react then compared to if you're standing straight up? You would look vastly different simply because of gravity. Very important point. So when doing this kind of stuff, we're mostly working with the clay, mostly using the clay build-up brush for the majority of the sculpting. But now, once we're adding some like sharper details, not super sharp details, just something more refined, I tend to use the damn standard brush because it's really good for adding sharpness to it.
And one thing when we're talking about brushes, that it's really nice. You see these, we need some fatty areas on the face because he can't just be like all necromancer all the way.
He can't be all evil.
Yeah, so up here by the nasal labial fold and around the mouth, we will tend to have a lot of buildup of skin.
Yeah.
And a lot of that needs to be round. That's just the way our faces are built.
Yeah.
And something like the clay buildup brush with no alpha on has this, it creates a really nice soft feel. It's really nice for building up volumes for muscles and fat and stuff like that.
I use the clay build-up brush for probably about 90% of all my sculpting. Like even professionally, when I'm doing like fine sculpting for things, maybe not the finest sculpting, but for the majority of the time, professionally and personally, I use the clay build-up brush for most of my day. So you can see now compared to the beginning of the video, now we're working way more with details because we have a character now, which the main volumes are working. And the silhouette is kind of working. Still some issues here. We're going to go back and address some of them a bit later on.
Yeah, and this is like, nothing is committed yet. Yes, you can see that there are, under the eyes and on the sides of the mouth, there are wrinkles and some soggy parts. But it's not final. You can always tweak it. You can always move it around. Because you see, there are no fine wrinkles or anything. So just a quick stroke underneath the eyes and we've got like a new volume, if that's what we wanted. This is purely to indicate where do we want to take this sculpt? And
this is concepting. For instance, what I'm doing now is this one idea I was trying out, that his nose would be made of metal. So he would like lost his nose in a war or something, and then his nose would be replaced with something like gold. We ended up not going for the idea because it was a bit too complex for this tutorial. I thought it was a kind of a cool idea, but this is purely concepting. We don't have any topology or UVs or anything to worry about right now. We will later on, as this is a pipeline tutorial, but currently anything goes. You can do literally whatever you want with this sculpt.
It's a lot of responsibility.
A lot of responsibility.
To put on people.
But here as well, when thinking about different materials, the nose here was supposed to be made of metal. You would sculpt metal very differently than you would sculpt skin, because it's hard. You know it's metal. I don't even have to explain metal.
How do you even explain metal? But the thing is as well, like where the metal joins the skin, obviously because he lost his nose, that would be scar tissue.
Yeah.
And scar tissue is very different from regular skin.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder, and there's just a lot more buildup because that's just scarring.
And if you're doing something like that, if you're doing scarring, I would find reference. You would go to the nasty parts of Google, and you would just find a lot of reference. I've looked at so much weird shit when it comes to work, because you had a lot. I do a lot of texturing work, and we have to do a lot of like scars and like burns and all that. So I've been to some pretty nasty parts of the internet. You don't want to go there.
Like our search history in general, just when it's work related, that's what I mean.
Of course.
That's
pretty dubious. You don't want to.
Oh, he's so sad now.
And also just like doing this, just adding in some pupils and like an iris as well is massively beneficial.
You can see how quickly the character changes just by indicating, the iris of...
Exactly. You get life right away. I mean, right now you get scary life.
Very scary life.
But you still get life to him.
And that's the thing. Immediately you're like, oh god, this guy, he wants to murder me.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to suck your soul out with his eyes. And that's something you can try as well. You can see if the character looks down or if he looks up. Huge difference. If he looks down, he would be more scary. If he looks up, he will look more scary. And if he looks down, he will be more arrogant. So very different character based on simply where you're placing the eyes, or which rotation the eye has.
That's again coming back to the eyes. The eyes affect everything so much.
Yeah.
It's just, and you just gotta practice that. Like, look at so much reference. Can't stress this enough. Reference all the time.
And don't Google old man.
Yeah, please.
Jesus Christ. Still upset about that.
I think, I remember we had a teacher once, and one of the things that really stuck with me that he taught us was that, let's say, I think what he used was like a fox. Let's say you want to make a fox. Mm-hmm. What everyone does nowadays is they go to Google and they just Google fox. Mm-hmm. What he did was like, okay, let's go to the library, find a book about foxes, because no one looks at that book, right? So it's like, try to be creative with where you find your reference or how you find your reference.
There's also a huge problem, like Morten is saying, that everyone keeps using the same reference today. I've been teaching design a couple of times now in the various schools, and one of the examples I use is, the generic orc warrior, which has a shoulder plate on his right shoulder.
With spikes.
With spikes on it. Why? I don't even know where to start with that. It's just everyone looks at the same reference, and they're not thinking functionality. But, if we were to do something like an orc warrior, maybe you should, go to the library or ask an historian on different cultures, and then
don't use World of Warcraft as a reference.
No, don't use World of Warcraft, because that's everywhere. If you keep looking at other people's work, you're gonna inevitably end up with something generic, something non-functional. So you need to look for, if you want to make something interesting, you have to use interesting sources.
Yeah. And when you're jumping on to something else, like when you're sculpting speaking of ear, sculpting an ear like this, especially on old people, it's a lot different, because ears is one of those parts, you probably heard this before, that ears is one of those, ears and noses, they keep growing throughout your entire life. And like sculpting that stuff is really interesting, so you can find a lot of interesting reference just on like old man ears or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And when doing this, we might have mentioned this, but maybe look at some reference.
Yeah, because like who can even remember what an ear actually looks like?
There are so many shapes,
and that's like again a good one. Is like to actually touch this.
Yeah.
What's skin and what's Is it cartilage?
Yeah, I think it's cartilage,
Yeah.
and then there is some like you have like the earlobe, which is just like fat and stuff going on. But like the thing about anatomy, for instance, is overall body anatomy is kind of logical. If you pull a muscle in somewhere, you know something else is going to happen.
Yeah.
But the ears are kind of obviously their shape isn't arbitrary because it makes sense.
But it's so alien.
It's so alien. Yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting it. It's just an alien shape. It doesn't make sense right away by looking at it. So you have to memorize the shape of an ear pretty much. You have to just memorize the helix, antihelix, earlobe, all the various parts there. Because if you memorize the parts and you know the parts exist, you can identify them and you know what you have to sculpt. If you don't know that the antihelix exists, then you're not going to sculpt it. Or you're going to sculpt something ambiguous. You're not going to sculpt it correctly. And ears are important. Let's say you're doing a perfect face and it's realistic and everything is fine, but ears are off. You might not be able to tell exactly what's off, but something is going to look weird.
And I guess that's one of the real hard things about doing anything human is that it's so easy to miss.
Yeah.
Because even though people not trained in sort of art and those kinds of things, they can still tell that something is off.
Yeah.
And even though you might not be able to put your finger on it, you're still like, this looks wrong.
That's the thing with doing tons of details and everything like that. You may not be able to see all the details and see all the effort put into it, but you can feel it. You can feel that there is a lot of thought put into the various parts here. So it looks like, when we're doing this, that, like we said before, it looks like we're just kind of winging it and just kind of sculpting this all from memory. But when doing this, you can be 100% sure on the second monitor there is a lot of reference of everything,
including my grandpa,
including Morton's grandpa.
He's an amazing old man face. It's really good. Though he's not this evil old man. He's a really nice old man.
No, he looks like a nice old man.
So
yeah, I've been using him for everything. I don't actually think I told you that I used your grandpa.
No, I didn't. I didn't realize until.
No, I used your. There was an alt tab here, and we saw my little reference, and there was Morton's grandpa. I used him for the nose. Because he has a pretty big nose.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's so big.
It's pretty big and old manny.
That's very old man.
And the more you know about the core of anatomy, which is the skeleton, the better it's gonna be. For instance, here we just refined the skeleton.
And you can see it the base that we laid down in the beginning. It's still what's being followed, right? The base of the skull. Actually, all of this, it's based around the skull, because there's so many landmarks on the skull. We're okay, let's attach the cheekbone. It goes up to the ear, and we can attach the muscles onto there. It's like a coloring book.
Exactly.
Once you have the landmarks down, you just fill in the blanks.
Yeah, that's always the hard part for me. The hard part for me for this sculpt has been done already. There are still issues with the sculpt, of course, but the hard part has been done in the way that the design is kind of there now. The rest is pretty much like Morten says, it's just fill in the blanks. And one thing a lot of people forget is that humans, at least most humans, they kind of have hair.
Yeah.
And
it's such an easy thing to skip when you're sculpting.
Exactly. So let's say you're doing a bald character, totally fine. But if you're doing a celebrity or something like that, you're doing something naturalistic, a person which exists, and you're doing them bald, it's not going to look like them. Nothing wrong with being bald, guys. It's just not going to look like the character.
I remember so many times seeing sculpts of famous women or something like that, and then it's only the face that's been sculpted, no volume in the hair.
Yeah.
And usually women in Hollywood, at least the ones I can remember, have hair.
Yeah, most of them. Yeah, I think I seem to remember that.
And it affects the silhouette so much.
Yeah.
So it's really important.
But not just the silhouette, also the overall feeling of it.
Yeah.
Long hair, for instance, is it's really soft. If you want a soft character, give them soft hair.
This has it gives you the character a completely different feel. You know, whether they're short haired or long, or is it spiky, is it soft?
And not just the overall hair in the head, but body hair, such as eyebrows and eyelashes. So important. If you make a character without those those aspects, it's gonna look weird. You might have seen like celebrities where they photoshopped off the eyebrows, and it just looks really freaky.
Yeah.
And actually, when sculpting this, I completely forgot to give him eyebrows, so I had to go in and like add that a bit later on. So in between the videos.
Sneaky.
Oh, it's so sneaky. But yeah, because it just looks weird. And same with eyelashes as well. If you want something to feel like sensual or cute, you need to give them proper eyelashes.
Oh, he got fat in the face. And this is an interesting part. Like there are a lot of details that have been filled in now, but you can still, as soon as you start moving things around, it's not like it just deletes everything, right? It still preserves the volume, so you can push the mouth up or widen the jaw, make it narrow, make it more like a rat face to get a very different feel of the character all of a sudden.
It's still pure design. This is concepting. You're not attached to anything here.
Oh, he's so scary.
Yeah, we just kind of like messed up the. You can see he's looking more down, and we're just playing with a bit like looking up and down. Now you can see he looks more sedentary. If you pull the eyes the other way, he looks scarier. Again, eyes are important.
Yeah, it really affects the character a lot. And the same with the amount of saggy skin, fatty stuff you have above your eyes underneath.
Yeah.
This will really affect it a lot.
Check the silhouette. Hit the V key in ZBrush, and then you can check the silhouette. So important. You really need to just check the silhouette a lot. The reason is that's a core design tool we have. It's one of the most basic design tools we have. If the silhouette doesn't work, the character is not gonna work properly. It needs to read right away. And lips as well. You really want lips to be done thoroughly. I mean, we can say that for literally every single stage of the...
Oh, we're going to make this proper and this proper. Also, this is important.
Just do everything properly. But like a big mistake with lips is to assume that lips just have this random shape, when in reality, they're protecting our teeth. So when doing lips, you need to think about what's underneath. So a lot of guys make the lips way too flat. Like it's just like a flat plane for front of the face, and the lips are just like slight curvature. But if you look at like the skeleton of a face, the skull is
it actually protrudes, or like it follows the curvature of the skull a lot. It's not just stuck onto the face.
No,
there's a lot.
All.
Like if you look at it from below, for example, you'll see. Like if you look at your face from below, you'll see your mouth actually curves a lot. A lot more than you think.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a very normal, common issue we see here. Is the lips are just too flat and not thinking what's behind it. It's kind of funny looking at the character because I made the lips a bit too soft. He looks a bit like I wouldn't say sexy, but
but it's a bit of sexy lips. But it's also like you have men with these kind of full lips, right? Yeah. But I feel like in his case, right this frame, he looks like a clown. A little bit because he has like these bigger lips.
Yeah, exactly.
Sexy lips.
Yeah, that was not what I was going for. So we do actually change the lips quite a bit from this. Yeah. But concepting, you can play with it.
He's actually a bit Joker-like at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. So this just shows how important lips are. And the size of the mouth as well. His mouth now is very like, it's not very wide. And we're going to put it a lot wider later on. And a common issue as well is the corner of the mouth as well, like where the lips meet. There is like a big depression down there. There's almost like somebody's taking a tiny spoon, and
just dug out. Like it actually, like if you think the mouth curves a lot, and then the end of the mouth really needs to go into the face, basically.
Exactly.
Because that's there's an opening there.
Yeah, and the top lip is generally going quite a bit more out than compared to the bottom lip. They're not directly on top of each other. There is it's like lying.
Yeah, generally it'll be sitting on top. I mean, people, if you have an underbite or something like that, the under lip will be like, it'll be pushed out a lot more. But it's a good thing to keep in mind.
For everything we're saying here, there is an exception.
Yeah, there's basically no hard fast rule in anatomy.
There are tools, and you learn the tools, and then you break them.
And that's why reference is king.
Yeah.
Like, just, oh, man.
There's so many times you look at like a real person, or sculpt or something, and you assume this is not the way it would be done in real life, but it turns out it's a scan. And your knowledge of anatomy is,
you learn something every day.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you know everything about, like from an anatomy book, it's only a representation of real life. You need real life to really take it to the next step.
Yeah. A really quick thing to just sort of spruce up your sculpting a little bit, change your material. Yeah. I mean, I have a couple of materials that I switch between just for like visual stuff. So like, switch a little here. But it also actually helps you to see the character in a different light.
Yeah, because the materials actually showed the characters literally in a different light here. Yeah. Like the cavities are displayed differently, the specularity level is different. So the character will be shown in a very different way. You want to pretty much have a material which is as close to the renderer as possible. You don't want to have something which goes crazy with cavities or anything like that.